Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. We lost a giant in the comic book business this weekend, Victor Gorelick, one of the great people in Archie Comics. Victor has been with Archie since the 50s. He spent 60 years with the company, and it's sad to see him go. He was a big force in the comic book business, not only at Archie, but also was part of the Comics Code. And, was a guy that was always there at big conventions, certainly in New York and in San Diego. And, we're going to pay tribute to him today with his passing. I had a conversation with Victor back in December of 2018. It was my only on-the-record conversation with Victor, but also to give us some thoughts about Victor, Mike Pellerito, one of the bigwigs at Archie, is on the show to share some memories of Victor and really talk about the big changes that have been happening at Archie in the last 10 years. Now, John Goldwater, the current president of Archie and son of one of the founders of Archie, has been a big creative force. Victor represented the creative flame of the past and made that transition into the modern era of Archie. You'll hear in Victor's voice the excitement about all the big innovations that Archie has gone through, whether it's the Afterlife horror comics, certainly the television shows, Riverdale and Sabrina, and literally Katy Keane, which only started last week. Victor was in the meetings and watching, the progress, the new innovations and revitalization of Archie's kind of soft reboot and getting ambitious with a lot of projects. Mark Waid, Brian Augustin's wonderful Archie celebrations of the various decades. The 40s and the 50s have wrapped up. They're going to go on with the 60s, I know, at the very least. It's a great time to reflect and talk about some of the amazing things that happened at Archie with Victor Gorelick, who passed away this weekend, and Mike Pellerito on today's Word Balloon. All brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, for your support via Patreon. Patreon.com/WordBalloon is the way to subscribe to Word Balloon and support Word Balloon as a sponsor. Word Balloon is free. It'll always be free, but if you want to help out the cause, you can go to Patreon.com/WordBalloon or the front page of WordBalloon.com and click on the Patreon ad. A few new subscribers have come on, and I appreciate that, and thank you for joining the League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Great stuff coming from Aftershock this month. John Layman's The Man Who Effed Up Time debuts this week, and we'll be talking to John as well in a companion podcast that'll be out today. There's also Zach Thompson's Undone by Blood, God Killers by Mark Sable, joining the ranks of great Aftershock books like Tim Seeley's Dark Red and Cullen Bunn's Dark Ark and Night Temporal and Marguerite Bennett's Animosity, Baby Teeth from Donny Cates, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis, and so many more. Go to their website. You're going to find genre-bending ideas from some of the best people in comics and really, really entertaining comics as well. Full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes to get these books ordered through your local shop are waiting for you at their website, AftershockComics.com. All right, let's start things off with my conversation from 2018 with Victor Gorelick. Man, it was great. I knew that the 50th anniversary of Sugar Suger was coming up, and that was a big deal. And we'll talk about it with Mike as well, but I'll tell you, you know how big that song is. You all know Sugar Sugar. It was insane. And Mike has a good perspective on it, too, as someone saying, look how long it's been since Sugar Sugar, and it's still a big deal. But, Victor was there with not only the initial release, but, they would put Archie songs on the back of cereal boxes. We talk about that. The Archie fan club that I was such a fan, I was a little kid. It was so exciting. Just like Foom, Friends of Old Marvel, and some of the other, the Merry Marching Marvel Society, or however you say it. Stuff like that. Archie was there with its own fan club and stuff. In fact, I believe the Archie fan club is still out there, which is pretty crazy. So it's great to get Victor's perspective in this conversation from 2018. So to start things off, a conversation with Victor Gorelick on today's Word Balloon. What's your title, Mr. Gorelick?
Co-president / editor-in-chief.
Okay, excellent. I wanted to get that correct. Victor Gorelick, welcome to Word Balloon. It's a pleasure to talk to you, sir. I'm excited to hear about your perspective on Archie Comics.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So when did you start with
Archie? What do you want to know? In October of 1958.
Wow, that's great.
Where were you?
Now, I'm 54, so I've been reading Archie for a long time, and I'm really interested in that really from the beginning to today. So tell me about Archie in 1958. You guys had a great position in the market and really maintained it for a very long time, and I'm interested in hearing what it was like in 58 at Archie. What were you doing?
Well, we were putting out a lot of books every month, and that went on for a while. I started working in the production department as an art assistant, and there were just thousands of pages of coming in every week. We had Katy Keane at that time, besides Archie, 80-page comics, 32-page comics. We didn't have the digest, and that didn't come until the 70s.
Okay.
But it was a lot of work. I mean, one of my first jobs was, in fact, my first job in the department was to take cleavages and navels out of Katy Keane.
I understand.
Well,
Dan DeCarlo was a great, what they call a good girl artist, and you know, I mean, obviously the classic designs for Katy and Betty and Veronica, you know, and the like. Well, you know, did Dan work on Katy Keane?
No, Katy Keane was written and drawn and inked and letters by Bill Wagen. He lived out in California.
Okay.
He would send his work every week, and you needed two people to carry the package up. He had so many pages in there. What he used to do as well, he used to put readers' names in and with the fashions that he used, and it was a very interactive publication. He offered stationery and membership cards and pins and all kinds of things. And there was an article many years later in the New York Times about some fashion designers who had to start by sending fashions into Katy Keane. That's how they got interested.
Yeah, that's
quite a few.
That's really great. Now, I was a member of the Archie fan club, and God, I wish I still had my membership card. I don't know if I haven't been paying my dues the last couple decades. I don't know if I'm still a member.
Did they have? I think they had dues. Yeah,
did they really?
25 cents, 10 cents, I think. We didn't have a little who came in though.
Understood. Man, and you're right. So, and Katy Keane eventually moved to Tower. Am I correct?
No, Katy Keane never moved to Tower. Tower Comics was started by Harry Shorten, who used to be the managing editor at Archie Comics years before, quite a few years before. I think he left about a year before I came to work there.
Oh, okay.
1957. And he started his own publishing company, and one of our artists, Sam Schwartz, who was very friendly with him, was asked to come on as editor there. I was in the, I guess, late 60s, early 70s. And he was working on Thunder Agent, and they did bring in some teenage characters called Tippy Teen. I don't know if you recall that.
Yes.
The Tippy Teen. And then you had, besides the Thunder Agent, you had Dynamo and some other characters. He had some great artists working for him, but the books didn't do well at all. I did some freelance work for him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in fact, I did, not on the teenage book. I didn't work on a teenage book, but I did some work on the first issue of Thunder Agents.
Wow.
I led the first story. Yeah, I led the first story. I had to go up to Wally Wood's apartment on the west side. And I was there till about, 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. I had to go up the flight of stairs in the brownstone that he lived in. He had this big, giant door with looked like a safe. He opened it up. I think he was sitting in a canvas beach chair. He set me up at an art table with all this. I brought all my stuff for lettering, and he just kept sending me pages with words on them for me to letter.
Wow.
And I read the first story, so
No, I love
that's one of my highlights. That's one of my highlights.
I bet. Yeah, I'm a Thunder Agents fan, and I've read some of the Dynamo, and I like Undersea Agent. I know that was more of a backup feature, but I always I thought that was a terrific feature.
Undersea Agent was being drawn by one of the assistants to Milton Caniff. I forget his name offhand, but he was the one who worked on that book. I used to color that book too.
So tell me about Wally Wood as a guy. What was he like?
Well, he was pretty laid back, and just gave me work to do. We just sat there and did work.
Okay.
Passed me the pages when I was finished. Hello, goodbye, and that's it.
I got you.
But there were a lot of people in his apartment, other people doing other things too. Help doing background, who knows? He has assistants. So it was still an experience, to work with him.
That's great. That's excellent. Well, let's get back to Archie.
He was a great artist.
Oh,
let's get back to Archie.
Oh my God, yes. Wood was an amazing artist, but yeah, well, you had some amazing artists at Archie as well. So let's talk about Don DeCarlo for a second. I mean, one of the, clearly, one of those great Archie artists that I imagine was still, doing things when you got to the company.
Mm-hmm. Dan DeCarlo wasn't full time when I first got there for the company, but maybe 6 months or so after that, he was full time. He had been doing a lot of work for Marvel Comics, working with Stan Lee. He did some work for them, and he also did some. He was also working on some like pinup books that he used to do, digest size, or I don't know who published them. Girly magazine, but cartoons. So he was doing, but this guy was the best artist you ever wanted for this type of work. Because Archie's not that easy to draw. He's a semi-realistic character. It's got a cartoon head and a realistic body, but it's all very simple art. And he was really bad. He could take a story that was all talk and make it move,
Yes.
So he was really good, and it's amazing that over the years, and I knew him from the 50s all the way up until he passed away, which is sometime in the 90s. He got better every job he took was better than the last.
I believe it.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I believe it. And also, as you said regarding Katy Keane, the amount of art that these artists were able to produce on a monthly basis was pretty incredible. Was Dan one of those prolific guys that could give you a ton of pages each month?
Yes, he was. And Frank Doyle did quite a bit of writing, most of the writing for us at that time. That Dan DeCarlo drew. He would send in a story a day, and after the weekend, we get 2 stories on Monday. It was just kept coming in. Work kept coming in. I never missed a deadline with any books while I was working there.
Wow.
We always had inventory. We always had inventory. So it was great. And when I first went, we had the newspaper strip, which was in over 900 newspapers. Bob Montana was doing it until he passed away in 1975, which was terrible.
Sure.
He wasn't that old.
Bob Montana, another classic Archie artist. Yeah, tell us about Bob.
Yeah. Well, I only met him twice. He came up to the office once, and then I met him once at a cartoon society when they were giving out the Reuben Awards.
Yes.
Everybody thought he was going to get one, and they gave it to somebody else, which was crazy.
Wow.
I had to wear a tuxedo and everything.
Wow. Well, the Reubens were the comic strip Oscars, but like the Eisners today for comic books that were the Reubens. And the Reubens are still around. A friend of mine was nominated, Mike Norton, for a Donald Trump comic strip that he does for Go Comics, the former Tribune syndicators. So yeah, I know the Reubens are still there. It's interesting how things have changed, and certainly from your perspective, tell me, in 1958, now this was a few years after the Senate really got involved with comic books and comic strips, and more so comic books, and concerns about the violence and the leading to juvenile delinquency and stuff. By 58, and again, I mean, obviously Archie was always considered, I would assume, clean entertainment, wholesome entertainment. But what was the feeling like at the company back in the 50s?
Well, John Goldwater, the president of the company at that time, he became the president of the Comic Book Authority.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if it was that, at one time.
Sure.
And he was that president for about 25 years or so, maybe more. And then one of his partners, son, Michael Silverblight, took over president of the Comics Code. We were always very careful about the artwork, and that's why I was taking cleavages and belly buttons out, because of the Code Authority. But there were other things that were even more important that you had to make sure you didn't do. Showing unique details of a crime. There was a whole list of things, very antiquated by the 70s and 80s, but we formed an editor's group to review the guidelines and come up with new ones. More, that made more sense.
Wow.
Than they did back then,
Did the artists ever resent you guys taking out the cleavage or the navels and stuff like that?
It was only how Katy Keane was. Then was Harry Lucy, who was also, he used to draw girls naked sometimes on the pages. He would draw them in the bottom skirt on the first page, and then leave them naked for the rest of the story, and leave the ink to put them on. Yeah, that guy you had to watch out for, but he was a great artist too. Unbelievable. He once, and to show you how much he worried about having to work on time, Harry Lucy used to live out in Long Island and then out in Hampton Bays, which is way out in Long Island. I think he was coming in from when he was still living in Long Island. And he came in on the train, and as he was coming across one of the edge, by a taxi cab. And he was holding his artwork, and he got a slight injury, but it was bleeding, and he got blood on the artwork. But he didn't stop. He just kept going. He got up and he just came to work, came up to the office. And the first thing he did was take some white paint and start cleaning up the pages. He said, "Harry, what's wrong with you? Why'd you go to the hospital?" And so he could have sued the guy. He could have made some money. It's nuts.
Wow.
But those are the artists were great. We had a great relationship with all the artists. They were all fun. Everyone had a great sense of humor. And that's why the stories were so good back then.
Absolutely, man.
I mean, we had Bill Vigoda worked for us for many. Bill Vigoda was Abe Vigoda's brother.
Oh, wow.
Younger brother, Abe Vigoda. And but Bill Vigoda was very much into opera. He used to work at the office a lot. He used to smoke a pipe and sit at the board listening to opera music or classical music and drawing.
Wow.
But that was another guy you had to watch out for, because while he was very good, in fact, he was working right through World War II at Archie, or MLJ in Archie, because he had a little problem and it didn't take him into the Army, so, which I'm sure he didn't care about. But he held the company together doing a lot of artwork. You look back in the 40s, you see a lot of artwork by Bill Vigoda. And he would do them completely. He lettered them, he'd ink them, he'd pencil them. Talking about doing hundreds of pages a month. How he did it.
Wow. That's amazing. I learned. Go ahead. No, go ahead, sir.
But he had a habit of drawing pictures on the back of the page. And one time he put pictures. I can't even give you the exact description, but it was a naked woman being impaled by a bull.
Oh my God! Oh Jesus!
And we always said to. I used to bring the artwork up to the. That was part of my job. I would deliver the artwork to the Commerce Code Authority for them to do. And then the engraver would come in, pick up the work, take it out to the engraver. But so she calls me on the phone. And she says, "Mr. Gorelick," she says, "I'm looking at one of these pages, the back of one of the pages, and there's a horrible drawing on there." And she kind of sort of described it to me. And I thought he maybe erased it because I used to erase some of them. But I said, "Gee, I was apologizing to her up and down. I didn't know what to say.
Well,
sure. It was a very embarrassing thing to even talk about. He was into drawing, but at least he didn't put it on the front page. He just put it on the back page. He was really an artist. I think the only reason he did comic books was because he had a family and he had to make steady income. And all the artists, they had steady income from Archie because they guaranteed work every week. And but he's really more of a fine artist. He used to do a lot of painting. He could sculpt. He should have been living in the village,
Sure.
But
wow, that's amazing.
He was a tremendous artist too. They all were.
That's
part of what was going on in the 50s, 60s. Now they're all gone. The only one that's left from all those artists, when there's Bob Bowling, he's not working anymore. He just does oil painting down and lives in Florida.
Have you ever asked him to do like a variant cover or anything? Would he be interested, or no? Is he completely out of the business?
I get him every once in a while. I get him to do a little Archie story, but it's so hard. But when I call him on the phone, he doesn't hear. He refuses to wear. He finally gives the phone to his wife, and she is pretty good, great. But when she finally gets what I'm saying, she gets to him. For now, I try to say, come over here for a 5 or 6 page little Archie story with place in the winter and send me some ideas.
Well, let's move on to the 60s. One thing, and it happened in the late 60s, and you tell me if there were anything significant before. Which came first, actually? Josie and the Pussycats or Sugar Sugar?
Sugar Sugar came first. Okay.
So let me ask about Sugar Sugar. Because I'll tell you what I know. I know that Don Kirshner, the producer behind Sugar Sugar, initially offered the song to the Monkees, and they turned it down. And so then he assembled his studio group that had Ron Dante, the singer, who had also had other pop hits in the 60s. A song called Tracy by the Cufflinks was a big pop hit that he sang. But so tell me how the association and how Kirshner ended up bringing Sugar Sugar to Archie.
Well, that was something that I guess he came. We had the cartoon show. We were going to have the cartoon show, which was being produced by
Filmation Studios,
and I guess maybe that's what I don't know if he was looking for the Monkees to be backup singers for that, but I guess he was looking for something where they would, Filmation might have come to him. But in any event, the whole deal was put together with John Goldwater. I really didn't get involved in that here. Well, we're going to have a cartoon show. There's going to be music with it. So, by the Archies, they could put a group together. And next thing you know, we had Sugar Sugar as the #1 hit. Ron Dante was great. And that went on for a while. We had quite a run. Archie was on the back of boxes of cereal with like records you could cut out and play.
Yes, I remember it well. Absolutely, I was a very small kid back then. I was probably, I was 4 years old in most of 1969, and Was that the year that Sugar Sugar hit?
It was around 70. It was closer to maybe 1970.
Oh, okay.
The show started in 69, I'm pretty sure.
The cartoon started in 69.
Correctly, in 69. So I guess, and the song came along probably not too far after it started. Not very well. I don't remember exactly. Maybe it might have been 69.
Well, regardless, it was. First of all, Archie. It's great that Riverdale has everyone talking about Archie again, and that Archie is at the forefront of pop culture again. But it's also important to point out that not only was Sugar Sugar and that Archie cartoon that ran for years, it was a big staple of Saturday mornings. Everything's Archie. I remember that, and the theme song very well as a kid. But also, well before that, Archie was a successful radio sitcom, right? Back in the 40s and 50s for like 10 years.
10 years, yeah, on the Blue Network.
That's amazing. So, it's like Archie's always kind of, been there and been part of pop culture. But the Filmation deal, and I know you said that, you weren't involved with, the actual deal making and stuff, but that had to be a huge shot in the arm for Archie and for the publisher. Did you guys see an increase because of the television show?
Yeah, especially with the advertising, too, because our circulation was so high. We really were doing very well. And sometimes I used to deal with the advertising manager, and we used to pull the advertising. You want to get so many ads, they said, you got to leave some room for the comics. You putting all these ads in.
Wow.
So, the advertising was a big part of income.
Well, sure.
To get about $7,500, $10,000 for a back cover. And it would appear on millions and millions of books.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, and also, so then, there was Sugar Sugar, and then, of course, Jingle Jangle, a nice follow-up hit. Right. That was a significant pop hit as well.
Yes, it was.
And I remember those records that you could cut out of the boxes of cereals and play on my little 45 record player and everything. Excellent. That was terrific. That was great, man. And it was a good run, and it went well into the 70s in terms of the various versions of the cartoon. Like I said, I remember them well. And also, I don't know if you guys still have them there on the Archie website, but I remember going there a couple years ago and watching a couple highlights from some of the cartoons. You guys had them up on the website and everything.
They may be on Comixology. I don't think they'd be on Comixology. I don't know if we still have them up there.
Okay.
I don't know.
Are there any plans to maybe make a DVD set of the old cartoons?
Not that I know of, not right now.
Okay.
I mean, John Goldenwater is John's son. John is out in California, and he's selling Archie, all the characters. They're going crazy out there. Sabrina is huge.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
I have.
Did you see it on Netflix?
Yes, I did. It's fantastic. It's a great show.
All 10 episodes?
I haven't. I haven't watched all 10, but I'm very impressed. That actress, she's terrific. She was great on Mad Men, and she really is a perfect Sabrina. And she's following a tough act with and now Melissa Joan Hart's run in the 90s, which was obviously pretty significant too.
Well, it was, but this is way different, this show.
Absolutely.
Much darker.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember. She was one of the kids, one of, he had two children, and she was one of the two kids, right?
Yes, on Mad Men. Yes, she was one of Don Draper's daughters, yes. So.
Yeah, I knew her. She still looks a little bit cute then, but she's very good.
Yes, agreed. Absolutely, man. No, and so Victor, what do you think of, because it was kind of a bold move for Archie to start getting inventive, and really, if you think about it, it started in the 80s with different ways of playing with. Well, first of all, let's stay on this, and then I'll go back to the 60s. But as far as Archie versus the Punisher is kind of like, and you'll know this reference, Jack Benny, The Horn Blows at Midnight. That's kind of the knock that the comic book gets, Archie versus the Punisher, which is ridiculous because it was always meant to be an Archie comedy with the Punisher dropped into it. And I honestly think it's hilarious. I think it holds up, and I wonder if the company put it back out now as a trade. It might get a little more respect than it did, than it has.
We'd love to get more copies of it out. We can go back to press, but Marvel Comics, not interested.
Oh, interesting. Of course. Yeah, well, I can, them having a Punisher.
When I'm at conventions, I get at least a few correct comments about Archie the Punisher. If we still have any copies, that was a great book.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was funny as hell, and it was just a kind of a perfect combination. Just that menacing face of the Punisher with Archie scared as hell.
What was interesting was, back in that time, Archie was never really big in the direct market. We're mostly newsstand. And the two sons who were running the company, Richard Gilmore and Michael Silverglide, really wanted to try and make some moves into the direct market. So I came up with this idea of having Archie come home one day. His parents are killed. There's blood all over the place. He goes to police. Nothing happens. So he initiated the Punisher. I said, no, you can't do anything like that. So I spoke to I was out in San Diego at the convention, and I had Tom DeFalco, who was at the table. Two other people there, too. Who else was there? Well, Tom DeFalco was two other people at the convention. We were at the table, and Bat and Lash was one.
Okay.
And forgot who else. Well, it doesn't matter. But we discussed doing the story, and Tom was going to write it, and get I think Stan Goldberg did the artwork.
Makes sense.
For the Archie artwork, and Buscema did the Punisher part. The characters.
Mm-hmm.
So you had two artists working on the book. And this is, I think that the Punisher never killed anyone in,
Sure.
So, and it was great. We had a lot of promotion on it. They had buttons it came out just in time for the New York convention. I remember, and it was really big in it. And if we sold it now, I bet it would sell out.
I think you're right. Sure. That's a shame.
They had a cover. They did a die-cut cover, and we did just a regular Archie cover,
Sure.
Punisher.
Yeah.
And I think the cover looked much better than Marvel's, but it was really a big hit, and I loved working on it, So now we're doing a little better in the direct market, especially with these darker comics.
Yes.
And the graphic novels that we're putting out. These were things that John.
Yes, young John.
Started young John, yeah. Has brought in, we had meetings and talked about things, and you've been here over 10 years now, running the company, and we've been doing a lot of different things.
And they've all been very interesting, honestly. Certainly the darker comics I know have been selling well, but I'll tell you, I really enjoyed Life with Archie that started with the Michael Uslan miniseries of Archie marrying both Betty and Veronica in different alternate timelines, and then it continuing with them married. It was a great soap opera. In a lot of ways, I wonder if that inspired the idea of Riverdale, because it was them as adults, but there was a lot of soap opera going on. My God, Miss Grundy dies, and Cheryl Blossom has terminal cancer, and Reggie is a reporter, and all of a sudden has to give up a source or go to jail. Moose is running for mayor. I mean, I'm like, this is insane, and it was great because as an old Archie reader, it really was fun to see all these different twists for the characters. And I thought Paul Kupperberg did an excellent job writing it, and the late, great Norm Brayfogle, an excellent job as one of their artists, too.
He was such a nice guy. I really liked him. We worked very closely with him, even though he was out in Chicago or someplace out there. But it's funny that you should mention the people dying off, like Grundy getting married to Weatherby.
Yes.
And then she died. When Kupperberg was writing that page, he said he was almost crying. He killed her off.
Sure.
And she died, And that's how bad these writers become to the characters. And he made me cry.
I understand.
So, anyway, but we're going to continue that now. It's 10 years later. Can't give you no details, but it's going to be coming out probably, hoping by the spring or next summer at least.
Oh, that's terrific.
And Archie, the Married Life 10 years later, also two storylines, one with Bay, one with Veronica, and the kids.
Oh, interesting.
In their 30s.
Man, hey, also, hats off. Go ahead.
Mike Uslan is writing this.
Oh, fantastic. Hey, and also, what a progressive step forward in putting Valerie with Archie and them having a kid. Honestly, that's terrific, and I really think a step forward in today's society to that Archie, and also, God, the creation of Kevin Kelly as well. I mean, it's terrific Kelly, that Archie has embraced today's culture. I mean, Archie was always about what was happening now. And it's great to see that the company wasn't afraid to take a step forward like that.
That's true. We used to keep up with the times. Well, like every year, George Glass was living out in California. He was another writer for us, and at that time, years ago, back in the 50s, 60s, even 70s, a lot of new things would come out, whether it's fashions or gadgets or toys or anything. They would come out out in the West, and he would do a story about it. And we'd say, "What is this? Who wears a see-through raincoat?" You had the girls wearing these see-through raincoats, and they were wearing bathing suits underneath.
Yep.
So I said, "What'd you get?" And so he sent me reference. He started sending reference on all these things. I mean, by the time our books came out, those things that were coming out, those new products, we had them in the books.
Sure.
We used them in the storylines. And he was very good at sending reference along with his stories. Another good guy. He's not here either.
All right, let's take a little break from our conversation with Victor and tell you a little bit more about our sponsor, Aftershock Comics. I know you've seen those Aftershock titles on your comic book racks. A whole slew of fresh concepts, titles written and drawn by your favorite creators. This is Christmas season, and as I've been saying the last couple episodes, sometimes you don't know what to get that person in your life who loves comics. Well, Aftershock might be a publisher that they haven't considered, but you will find great genres and great stories from your favorite creators. You can get things like Jimmy's Bastards, the spy series that I love from Garth Ennis and Russ Braun. There's Pestilence from Frank Thierry and Oleg Akunev, which, of course, depicts the 14th century Black Plague as the first recorded zombie outbreak. You can get the first trade now, get them hooked, and then the second trade is coming out in early January. There's also things like Witchhammer, Aftershock's first original graphic novel from Cullen Bunn and Dalibor Talajic. That'll be in comic shops December 19th, right in time for a last-minute Christmas grab. Now, these creators came to Aftershock to tell their kind of stories with no rules, no forced continuity, a new platform where anything goes, and a lot of characters might get wiped out. So you can't count on following a character and making sure they're going to make it to the end of the story. In the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to more Aftershock creators. In fact, Cullen Bunn is coming up in just a few days to tell us about Witchhammer and the Brothers Jack Cool and some of his other books as well. But you don't have to wait. You can check out full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, let's get back into more Archie conversation with Victor Gorelick on Word Balloon. A couple things from the 60s that we forgot to talk about. One is when you brought back the superheroes and both the superhero line where you had the Jaguar and the Shield and, the Web and some of your superheroes, but also you incorporated Archie and actually maybe it started before the 60s when you had Pure Heart the Powerful and Captain Hero and Super Teen.
Right. Well, Marvel was doing so well with the superhero books. John Goldwater wanted to see if we could put out some books. Not serious books like Marvel and DC are putting out, Marvel in particular, but a fun type of book where Archie is a superhero, Betty, Veronica, Reggie.
Yes.
So we came up with that. Came up with from Frank Doyle. Came up with the characters and to change them and so forth. And Bill Vigoda did a lot of that work. If you look back at some of those stories. And the regular artwork, the Jaguar and Shield and all that, that was mostly done by Paul Ryman. And so it was, I look back at those, when I used to see those books, I used to, cringe, I would read some of them. But I speak to people today, and they remember the books, and they love them.
Well, maybe they hit them at the right age, because I know I was a little kid when I saw them reprinted in some of the digests, and I was like, "Oh, I've never heard of these superheroes before." And yeah, you're right. I don't know if the stories hold up, but the ideas were fun, and I'm glad that they've occasionally come back. I know in the '80s you had to deal with DC, and DC was publishing the I forget what they were called. Is it Red? I can't remember the imprint. It was with Red, I think. Red Impact. Circle. Red Circle.
No, that's Archie was Red Circle.
Oh.
They went on to Impact.
Impact, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So, there's good concepts there. I think there were good superheroes.
Yeah, there were good concepts, but that was a licensing deal between us and them. We licensed the characters to DC, but they didn't do very well. So
understood. There was one Black Hood story that I remember. Did Gray Morrow or somebody draw it? Somebody really.
Gray Morrow. Yeah, he already drew it.
That was beautiful, man.
Yeah. Kip Berlin.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And am I right? That was also a pulp character, not only comics, but old pulp magazines where there were some prose Black Hood stories as well.
Yes. Well, Black Hood was on the radio too.
Wow.
I don't remember. Probably also in the 40s, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, I've never heard any Black Hood radio shows, but my God, that Gray Morrow story in particular that I saw, I believe in one of the digests. Oh my God, that thing was beautiful. Great idea.
He was a great artist.
Oh, absolutely.
Great artist. Wrote and everything. He was. I felt so bad when he passed away, but I worked very closely with him for a long time on a lot of projects. We did a book together on there were two, the Super Cops. You remember that comic? It went for a couple of issues.
No, I don't.
There were two cops. There were two detectives in New York. Bob Greenberg and I forget the other guy's name. My mind is going. But anyway, they were in the newspapers every day. They used to be like Batman and Robin. Catching all these crooks. They wait on the roof and they come down and they catch these crooks or whatever they were. And they were arresting people who were filling up the jails, And they became very popular. And they decided, Greenberg wanted to do a comic book. I guess he must have gotten some feedback from the police department. But so he did a book he wrote a book on the Super Cops. And we did a couple of comics. And he lived not too far from me in Brooklyn. I used to go over to his house and bring him the script to read and show him the artwork and so forth. And I got to be close with him. So it was nice.
That's cool. I remember that I don't know if it was a feature film or a television film
about the Super Cops. Now that you say that, Batman and that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but what was really actually the artwork was from Gray Morrow. So I was going, and Gray Morrow lived in Brooklyn too. So I was going to his house and to his house, going around delivering and picking up artwork. It's crazy.
And Archie put out Super Cops?
Yeah, we put that out.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, that would be something interesting. I don't know how much Gray Morrow material you guys have, but, and I know he's kind of a forgotten name, unless you're of a certain generation. But, man, it would be great to see a collection of Gray Morrow work that he did for Archie.
We put out a book called, it was like a horror book. Chilling Adventures, and is that what this is? No, that's the Sabrina book. I had another book that we put out that had all the Gray Morrow work in a trade paperback. I didn't get the name for it. I'd have to get up. Look.
No problem.
I'll tell you afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So, I don't know how well we only did one book. I had Gray Morrow, quite a bit of Gray Morrow stuff, and some other artists, a lot of other pretty famous artists. But that was under Red Circle.
Okay.
Those stories that was done under Red Circle.
And we should talk a little bit about Josie and the Pussycats.
Yeah.
That was a great success, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, the TV show did very well. The live-action movie that they did wasn't that big of a hit, but I think it has a cult following, so if you're up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you might see it come through. And but we're putting out some Josie books now. We put out some Josie comics, and we're working on some Josie trade paperbacks now. And you might see Josie back in hopefully on TV one day.
Well,
I know that John was working on that.
Okay.
We're trying to put together a live band, Josie and the Pussycats. So we'll see what happens.
Well, and I know they've been characters in Riverdale as well. So that's been nice. Now, really, congrats on getting the Riverdale deal. And it's great that the show is doing so well. I think it's a great dark soap opera comedy. I know that there's serious stuff going on, but you can't help but smile in that soap opera way. They get a little bit of humor in there. But it's really good. I missed it last night though, so I did too.
I have to watch it today. But I read them all,
Sure.
So,
and so going into this dark direction, is it? Were you surprised? Were you fearful?
I was initially proposed. I was a little, not so much surprised. I was a little nervous that this might not work, but I was wrong. It turned out to be a great move. Because it goes so many different directions with the characters. Veronica jumped as a werewolf, Veronica as a vampire. It's crazy. We had what was the not Life with Art. We called it
the zombie book. Yeah, I can't remember the title of it either right now.
It's been out of the picture for so long. Archie, or whatever it was.
I understand. That's all right.
I can't believe I'm not remembering.
I understand.
Anyway.
Well, but it's great.
But it was a really good book, and unfortunately, we had so many, about 7 or not, maybe 9 issues or so.
Yep.
Maybe 10. And then Roberto, who's worked on the show, he was writing it, but he couldn't write anymore.
Sure.
Write the book. He kept saying he's trying. And the writers could have written it, but he didn't want anybody else to touch it, I guess.
I understand. Yeah. Well,
Chilling Adventures and Sorcery.
Well,
Chilling Adventures and Sorcery, that was it.
Chilling Adventures.
Chilling Adventures is a specialty.
Okay.
And that has a lot of those great models. It's a trade paperback. We never did in a regular comic, just in a trade.
Can I tell you prior to that, decades, because I read it in the 70s, but I guess it's a story from around the time you joined Archie. One of the scariest Archie stories I ever read was the one where they go to the mansion and they find the teddy bear that obviously is cursed, and it almost Betty almost jumps off a cliff.
Almost goes off a cliff, yeah.
Oh my God! Alex Segura, they were putting together an Archie Halloween special, and he's like, what stories? I'm like, dude, the teddy bear story. And like I said, I thought it was from the 70s. The fact that it came out in 1958 impresses me even more. And it has that great, it's not a twist ending, but there's a great, like, kind of typical horror movie sort of ending that, and I don't want to spoil it for people who may want to seek out the story and everything. But seriously, that was great. Do you know, and obviously you know the story I'm talking about. Do you have any specific memories of that story in particular?
Well, I know that Bill Vigoda drew, I don't remember who the inker was. The writer must have been, I had to be Doyle for that time. Because Bob Bowley was working on Little Archie mostly.
Okay. Loved Little Archie, by the way.
Yeah, well, Bowley his books always sold in the direct market for some reason. So he was pretty well known. Maybe because he signed the books. Well, he always signed them. And his stories were great. He had so much insight to kids. It was unbelievable. And he doesn't have any kids either.
Oh, wow. Well, and also I'm glad that you let my buddies Art Baltazar and Franco do some new Little Archie stories in the last couple of years.
Those guys are hysterical. I love those guys.
Well, they're perfect for Archie. Yeah. They're perfect for Archie.
Yeah. They did took some of their artwork and made a children's book out of it. They did the cover or something. I don't know. We put it together. I wasn't working on that project. There are things going on here that I don't even know about. Believe it or not. All of a sudden, I'll see something. Hey, when did we decide to do this book? Nobody tells me anything anymore. I don't know what.
You mentioned that Archie didn't do well in the direct market, but one place it always did well was in the supermarket.
Check out
those digests. From again when I was a little kid up until through my teen years, if the subject matter struck me, I would pick them up, and that had to be tremendously beneficial to the company.
More beneficial than I can tell you. It was so successful. It's unbelievable. They sell well, but none of the comics like they used to sell back in the 70s, 60s, 70s days. But they still do very well. They hold up. It's a nice package. The price is a little more than it used to be.
Sure.
But everything goes up.
Of course.
There's so much competition with the internet. Kids have so many different things to look at and to read that sometimes comic books are the first thing on their mind. But those digest books the parent buys.
Right.
They go to the checkout counters, they'll see the book, they'll remember it from when they were a kid, and they'll pick up the books. And if the kids don't read them, they'll read them themselves.
Of course. No, absolutely. That's how I got them. Absolutely. My parents coming home from the grocery store and throwing me a digest, and that was terrific.
Well, throwing it to you or throwing it at you?
Well, depending on their mood. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes throwing it at you. Absolutely. But I was a good kid. I had Archie as a model to I'll tell you honestly, I'm so thrilled that Archie has moved in the directions that it has, because I do. I think it's an important part of comic book history, and sometimes I really feel like there's such a focus on the superhero market that you forget about all the other components of the business that kept it going through the highs and lows of the decades. And also now, when I do think non-superhero books are being more appreciated, that there's no reason for Archie, especially with the interest in Japanese manga and the teenage stories that Japanese manga tell. And it's like, well, that's great. But, Archie's been telling American teenage stories for decades and still does a great job at it.
Yeah, we do.
There you go.
The plan. Did you see 1941? Did you read that?
I did,
yet?
and I'm glad you bring it up. Yes, and I'm loving it. In fact, I had a great conversation with Brian Augustin about it just a few weeks ago, and also Mark Waid a couple months ago. I love it. I think it's. I'm thrilled because it's great to see World War II from the Riverdale perspective, and I think it's a good, solid drama. That is it, man. I'll tell you, you feel for the parents and you feel for the kids, and man, this is a very beside himself Archie. That it's I think it's a tremendous story. I'm really, really enjoying it.
I have to tell you, I think that's one of the best, if not the best, we ever put out, in my opinion. The work, the story, it's just tremendous. And Archie actually started in 1940. His first appearance was in PEP,
yes.
number 22. So that was his first appearance. So 1941, we went into the war in 1941.
It's great.
So,
well, also the characters are so strong and established through all these decades that you can make them even more realistic, as you guys are in this story. And it all makes sense. God, the best is in one of the early issues when Archie and Reggie are about to have a fight on the beach, and it's like, hey, man, like they stop themselves because they are getting older, and it's like, hey, this is ridiculous. Let's not fight about this. And it's like, wow, they're being real people, as opposed to Reggie or Archie scheming to get back at each other. The stakes are high. The stakes are real. And that's what's really interesting, is seeing them deal with these real life stakes of what people were going through, not only on the battlefield but on the home front as well, and all the emotional conflicts that they all must have gone through during that period.
Mm-hmm. It was a tough time, and the writers Wade and I forget the other guy's name,
Brian Augustin,
who wrote the book.
Yeah,
right. Who wrote the book? And the artist who did all the research.
Yeah, Peter Krause.
I mean, he
yes.
said all the research along with the script, and so everything that's in there is it's not made up. It's real stuff.
Yeah.
The uniforms, the guns, tanks, whatever, cars,
the clothes,
clothes, everything.
Yeah.
I think it was the best thing we've ever put out. When it's all finished with the 6 issues, we'll put it into a graphic novel. So
I understand it. No, it's well deserved because it is. It's a tremendous story, and yeah, Peter Krause is terrific. I know he's collaborated with Wade a lot in the past on other projects, and he's a terrific artist. It's a really, really great book, and again, it shows you the adaptability of this Archie universe, that you can really tell any kind of story with it. And I know you guys have throughout the years. I mean, you mentioned Tom DeFalco on the Punisher project. Tom has been a great writer for you through the years. I've also enjoyed the fact that you've hired other Marvel guys. Well, certainly Paul Kupperberg is a great writer, and Al Milgrom, a great artist that I know has done work for you guys for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mark Waid used to work at Archie for a while. I don't know how many years, maybe a couple of years. He worked at Archie at the production department. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Prior to him writing for Archie, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Maybe he doesn't want to tell anybody he worked for Archie. I don't think he was that happy here. I don't think he liked any of the stories. But yeah, he really did a lot of research on the characters when he was here. So, he has a really good background on all the Archie characters. One thing about the Archie characters, they have their disagreements and their arguments and their fights, they're always there for each other.
Yes.
Which is something that you don't see all the time, and that's what makes them so popular and such good characters.
Agreed. Well, and they're also beyond Archie, Betty, Veronica, you got Pops, and you've got Archie's parents, and certainly the Lodges, and I mean the Coopers, and I mean this extended family of characters that, again, through the years, you've leaned on these characters to tell other stories. And yeah, it's a great unit. I mean, I think lead characters are only strengthened by their supporting characters, and Archie is a classic example of that. That everyone else in the story is very important. You recognize them immediately. You recognize their role, and they're always there to make for interesting entertainment.
You should be doing our PR work.
Well, as I said, I wish I could find my membership card, because I know in the early 70s I was an Archie fan club member, and I'll tell you, when I got that card in the mail, that was a very exciting day in my life. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, as they say, Victor. Absolutely. So, well, listen, I don't want to keep you, but
okay.
I'd be interested in hearing, did you do, as quickly, and we can get into it maybe in a future conversation, did you do a lot of other work for other companies?
Well, just occasionally. I had some friends. I saw Brodsky over at Marvel Comics.
Oh, sure.
Would call me every once in a while if he needed something lettered or colored, and I did that. I know the bosses up here didn't like the idea of us going to the people, especially staff people, doing freelance work for somebody else, but somebody else paid more money at that time. So
I understand.
I would take a job and do it. I used to letter some of the Napa ads that they used to run. I don't know if you recall those in the Marvel books. And what else? We also did, by the way, we also did a lot of custom comics, which we didn't talk about.
Oh, sure. Yes, when you say custom comics for the audience, like if the American Dental Association needed a comic book to promote something.
We did something. We did that as a promo page with that baseball player, the Yankees. I'm forgetting names.
What decade?
Gets me my age. What's that?
What for the Yankees? What decade would it have been? Was it
Doc
Gooden?
Back in the 90s. It was
Dwight Gooden, maybe.
No.
Hitter?
Yeah.
Ron Guidry?
No.
All right, I give up.
He was a pitcher.
I'm a Chicago guy. I could keep going if it was Chicago.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a Yankee fan. You think I'd remember? I'll remember it after I hang up the phone.
No problem.
But anyway, that was only a page, but we used to do comic books. We did these little 1/3 size comic books for Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, and in fact, we used to reprint them all the time. And then we had Radio Shack comics that we did.
Oh, now those I remember. Okay.
They were giveaways in the Radio Shack stores. And what they do is each issue would produce a new product that they were using, whether it was a computer or whatever Radio Shack was putting out at the time, walkie-talkies.
Sure.
And they had two characters, Alec and Shauna, I think was the two named characters, and we did a lot of comics for them, and it was a lot of work, and it was 100% sale.
That's cool.
And they used to go back to the press on some of them. We did books for the FBI. Did a book on peer helping. I go down to Washington with the writer. Went into with the FBI guys and girls.
Huh.
That was fun. I used to handle all those books.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Anyway.
Well, I appreciate your time today, Victor, honestly, and thank you very much for sharing these stories, and continued success. And
thank you very much.
It's a great time to be an Archie fan, and I'm glad that you're around to enjoy reap the benefits, if you will.
Yeah, I'm getting like an old car. My parts are going little by little. I have to get parts replaced. My parents should have taken out a long-term warranty.
Well, I'd love to have another conversation with you in the future.
Okay, whenever you want, let me know.
The late Victor Gorelick from 2018. We transition now to a conversation with one of the guys I've really enjoyed to get to know over the last few years, as I say in my introduction to him, Mike Pellerito from Archie Comics. Mike and Alex Segura are two of the bigwigs that are overseeing things at Archie. Always friendly guys, fun to share meals with them and just hang out and chat, whether it's at a big show or a little show. But I knew when Victor passed this weekend, I wanted to get the perspective of somebody that enjoyed working with him. And, Mike spent 20 years working with Victor. So he's got great perspective on what it was like watching Victor in action all those years. So let's talk more about Victor and Archie Comics with Mike Pellerito now on Word Balloon. Well, I'm talking to one of the bigwigs at Archie Comics, Mike Pellerito, a guy that I've gotten to know the last couple of years. Mike, thank you for coming on. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but it's always great to talk to you.
I can't thank you enough, John. I know the interview you did with Victor, we were just talking about 2 years ago. He loved it. He talked about how brilliant you were, how good the whole conversation went, and, for you to follow up like this is really, really terrific, and I'm just happy you're doing it. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate that, man, a lot. And I'll be honest, I'm sorry that I didn't have another chance to talk to him, because what a career, and what a force in the American comic book business, and a guy. There's nothing I like better than talking to older people, because they have perspective and they understand where things were. And they see the changes of their business or their life, and they are the ones that I always say it's not so much wisdom as it is perspective, because that's what happens with experience. You're just around, you see the changes, and you've got a point of view that somebody new to the business or even 10 years into the business can't have. What Victor had, in 60 years of being at Archie.
I never thought about it that way as far as perspective. And it's really perfect to put it that way, because he started as a kid, like a teenager at Archie, and he really had the perfect perspective. He understood the industry, he understood the changes. He, would roll with it. Victor really got it. I mean, every day, and he's one of those guys that came into work every day. There was no messing around. And you could ask him about anything. Sometimes it'd be work, sometimes it'd be comics, sometimes he did have a really good perspective on everything.
And when I think about the changes at Archie, and especially the changes that have happened in the last 10 years or so, that's really cool that he got to see this resurgence in the brand. And, I've always been, I'm a lifelong fan of Archie. I was telling you before we started recording, and I told Victor, and the people will hear this when I play the part of the podcast when I talked to Victor, I was a proud member of the Archie fan club as a little kid, and it was really exciting getting the mail and the membership card from Archie Comics. And I don't know, man, I was that right age, because Sugar Suger happened, I think, in '69, I want to say.
Yeah.
And I was like 4 years old and had older brothers and sisters and cousins that were into Archie Comics, and especially the girls, read a lot of Betty and Veronica and stuff. And, it was great stuff, man. And then the cartoon exploded, and, everything's Archie. And, I mean, I love that. That was really, really cool. And then to, 50 years later, I mean, Victor was so excited about Riverdale and Sabrina. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, hey, Riverdale. He's like, Sabrina. What about Sabrina? I'm like, yeah, man. So it's really cool that, again, he was ringside for all of this and really got to see the best times of Archie 50 years ago and even today.
So Victor was at Archie longer than most people, have been alive at the company, which is amazing. And so I've worked with Victor for 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
He hired me in the art department, so I was cleaning up pages, working my way up.
Okay.
He was more happy in the last 10 years than all the time I knew him at Archie.
Wow.
And, so John Goldwater comes in really out of nowhere.
His the grandson of the founder, right? John Goldwater.
No, John is the son of the founder.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, so John. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So, so that John kind of came out of nowhere, and I didn't know who he was. Victor knew who he was, and I was like, and we're signing the paperwork because John bought in. He wasn't like an inheritor. He came in. He wanted to take the company where it is now and keep going. And I remember like, Victor, who is this guy? He goes, trust me, it's good. Trust me, it's good. And usually when people say that, you get a little nervous. Trust me, but I was like, okay. Like you gave him the stamp, I'm cool. We'll see what it is. and all the different things, you would think, the old guard would push back. But Victor was like, yeah, we got to do this, we got to do that. It's about time. The content, the story ideas, even being, the elder statesman of Archie, he was still contributing creatively. And like Dan Parent came up with Kevin Keller.
Yes.
But there were pieces of that character that were kicked around in the office, too. Like having Kevin, father being a military guy, and Kevin a brat, and then ROTC kid came from Victor. Like different things and storylines and just having him weigh in, even if it was just like, as you said, the perspective, is the greatest tool in the universe. Never mind, he'd rattle off people who, that page was inked by Terry Zenix, and that you could tell that's Harry Lucy, and you could tell that, and he would just name everybody, and then he'd have a story for every artist for 60 years of the company, going back to Bob Montana in the golden age of comics, never mind just Archie. It was unreal.
That is really cool. Yeah, I really am interested. As you say, he joined the company as a teenager, and so I'm assuming this was in the 50s?
I can't remember if it was 57 or 58, but it was October, because Victor and I would always do Oktoberfest. Victoberfest in October. So we would sneak beers and burgers into the office or go out to a bar and celebrate his anniversary every year. And a couple of years we did, the big anniversaries. I was there for his 50th, and we surprised him with a plaque, and we snuck in a story in the comics. And then the 60th, we did a New York Comic Con. We gave him a nice picture framed with a really cool cover for each of the decades he was here at Archie, and a picture of him in the middle.
Oh, my God. That's amazing. That's really cool.
Surprising him was the hardest thing in the universe to do. Like, super slick. He noticed everything. Like, forget, like, if there was a comma out of place in a comic book, he noticed it from a mile away. But to sneak in stories, like we did an anniversary story for his 50th, where it was Man of the Year, and it was a big surprise. We had to run, we had to get the printer to help us, the freelancers to help us, the staff. Like, it was a CIA level operation to sneak in a story in a comic book.
He was kind of in the same department you were when you started at Archie, right?
Yeah, I guess so. He was doing a lot of the art corrections, dealing with artists, and continued to just kind of evolve his position.
Man, and was art director, editor-in-chief. Were there times when, and I'm thinking of some of the old-timers I know, like, did he ever have Dan DeCarlo stories and stuff? Any good Dan DeCarlo Victor stories?
He had stories on everybody, and they were all great. When I started, so 20 years ago, it doesn't seem like a million years ago, but all the artists were coming in and out at least once or twice a week to pick up and drop off their work, which is kind of like a time capsule. So, and it was like a circus. They all would line up outside Victor's office. We were in the art department. We'd be making copies and getting them the next story. And one by one, they'd go into his office and joke around, and all the old-timers were there, like, teasing each other, teasing us in the art department. Like, it was just so cool how warm and friendly. I remember being new and thinking how nice every single freelancer who came into the building was to me, and they didn't have to be. And, I knew a couple of the freelancers before I got there. I knew Dan DeCarlo when I was a kid. We went to the same barber out of all the weird coincidences.
Insane. Okay.
and yeah, like my barber caught me drawing. My dad used to take me to get a haircut. The guy caught me drawing, and you like to draw? You like comic books? You like Archie? Oh yeah, like who doesn't? Of course. And he goes, okay, hang on. He calls up. He goes, hey Danny, there's a kid here. He likes to draw. When can he come over? I was like, oh, huh? And then he goes, oh, it's Dan DeCarlo. And everyone knew Dan DeCarlo's name.
Wow.
So it's like, oh, wow. So I remember on my interview telling that to Victor. He's like, oh, okay, cool. So it's a very neat place. It still has that family vibe. Dan Parent is like the new, I think, the classic guy who's really setting the standard. And like he comes into the office, not every week anymore, but every month or two. And it's kind of really good vibe. And that always was set from Victor.
That's excellent, man. And no, I know what you mean. And Dan has that classic DeCarlo, Stan Goldberg kind of Archie look in his art. And I follow his Instagram and love seeing his, commission sketches. And, of course, as you said, creator of Kevin Keller, for God's sake. And, no, isn't that great? On the one hand, he is the traditionalist, I think, in the company from an art standpoint, but also the innovator in terms of, getting Kevin in there. And Victor was cool with that. I mean, there was a time when Archie had gotten conservative is such a, trigger word these days for some. But again, I guess traditionalists or whatever that, at least that was the perception that Archie had become too typical in its presentation.
It was safe.
Yes, there you go. That's
safe.
a much better word. Okay, there you go. And, so yeah, tell me about that's a great pivot moment is when things like Kevin Keller happened and stuff. Was that when John, younger John took over and stuff, that stuff started happening? Or, did it have...
Yeah.
Okay. And did John bring those, say, hey, we got to get more modern? I mean, was that John's attitude when he started running things?
Oh, yeah, from day one. And then almost everybody in the staff was like, oh, thank goodness this guy's got that attitude. Because everything was safe. And to try and get a new idea before, you could almost pick the desk you wanted your idea to die on because there was there's so few adventurous spirits at Archie. And, Victor could take an idea and back you up so far, but at a certain point, you can only waste so much political capital on stuff. And then, John came in and it was someone was referred to it as a shot of adrenaline. And, whatever's not broke, don't worry about it, but everything can be fixed. And it was not just creatively, all our distribution, how the company was run, everything was about streamlining, making it efficient. And at the core of that, the stories had to be cool and rock and roll and relate to what's going on. And, the neat thing about Archie, and this is where Victor's perspective would come in, was he understood the core of the characters. So we could break with tradition and not break the characters with something like Afterlife.
Sure.
And the characters were held true to who they were, so now you can do anything you want. And you can still have a classic version, you can have a horror version, you can have the new Mark Waid version, whatever you want.
Yep.
You can do and not have to worry about it being too far away from the center, and you can still have a good Archie comic.
Well, and another big innovation specifically to the Archie universe prior to Kevin's debut was, Cheryl Blossom, and I want to say that happened in the 90s. Did you ever have a chance? I'm assuming that was before your time, Cheryl, like a couple years before you joined the company.
It probably was maybe 4 or 5 years. And at that point, they did a book called The Love Showdown, which reintroduced Cheryl, I believe, or introduced Cheryl.
Okay.
I'm blanking on the timeline. And at that point, and that really, a lot of that came from Dan Parent and I believe Bill Gollier.
Okay.
And they kind of pushed for that. And then you had all the, tried and trues like Dan DeCarlo, and I think George Glatter wrote a lot of it. And that, at that time, really blew up in a major way. And at that point, doing Cheryl Blossom was risky for the company because she was a little sexier than what they had done before. And still, by today's standard, is so, tame.
Yes.
But that was part of it. And you look, and there were some drawings that Dan did that did not see print that were definitely too racy.
Hilarious.
A little too sexy. Yeah, but, you think about Cheryl and then her roles on Riverdale now, and
sure.
she's again, all these newer characters being added on to characters created in the 40s still work so well. It's amazing.
Well, and again, it's that great teenage, air quotes soap opera, and certainly in the case of the TV show Riverdale. But I mean, it was always teenage problems, and I've loved that, and also that Archie has truly always reflected the decade it was happening in. I mean, I read that great a doctorate kind of book, The 10-Cent Archie, that kind of focused on the 50s and the 60s. And again, man, I was reading those reprints in the digests when I was a little kid in the 70s and everything. So I remember seeing all those stories. And, I mean, Archie was hand in hand with the 60s beach movies, for example. Yeah. And that's 20 years after the original. Hell, even in the 40s, I love pointing out to people who don't know about old-time radio and how prevalent, comedies and dramas were on radio just as they are now on television. And I'm like, hey, everyone is excited about the Riverdale Renaissance and everything that's happening on TV. It's like Archie had a radio show, had a weekly sitcom for like 10 years on the radio. And it was a big deal. Yeah. So, I mean, and that, again, a 10-year run, that's really impressive. But that's the thing. Archie was always part of that dynamic. And in fact, you mentioned, what Wade and Brian Augustin are doing together on the Archie, books of the 40s and 50s that they're doing now and reflecting back. I mean, that's the thing. It's an adult sensibility, but really, in a lot of ways, they're covering the same territory.
Yeah, and I think Mark gets it as well as anybody else. He's such a brilliant writer. He did it on the reboot. Even though we're adding in so much more, I don't know if mature is the right word, but soap opera elements and a little more realistic teenagery kind of story.
Yeah.
He still peppers it with good comedy. Even if it's a serious subject matter, there's always a moment where you laugh. And if you have a laugh with Archie, even in the Afterlife book, there were moments that were dark humor, but they were still funny. You laughed.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't have a good time with an Archie comic book, you're doing something wrong. And luckily, we've been able to do that right for a long time.
Well, the turn to horror was really amazing, and the success of Afterlife with Archie and all the subsequent horror books that have followed in its path. I'll tell you, when Michael Uslan did Archie the Married Life, that got my attention again. And then, in fact, the Life with Archie series. And, in fact, the one time I talked to John was right before they announced that they were killing that version of Archie, and I was bummed because that was really exciting when Life with Archie happened. And I was telling my older cousins and brother and sister, like, hey, I'm like, you would not believe what's happening in Archie right now. Moose is running for mayor. Reggie is protecting his source because he's a newspaper journalist. And I go, and he's, subject to contempt of court. I'm like, crazy stuff is happening in Archie right now. It's amazing, and they're great because it still works and it's still Archie. And then, man, I'll tell you, another guy that passed away, Norm Brayfogle, did great work on that series as well.
He was great.
Yeah, Jesus. So I mean, it's really been fun. Did Victor ever say, was there a member of the group? I can also appreciate, by the way, and clearly Victor loved the characters, but also, I mean, it is your job. So I don't know how he felt. Did he ever talk to you about any of the characters as far as that goes? I mean, I always love quoting Ed Brubaker, who said, my perfect retirement will be I'll just be writing Jughead stories when I'm in my 70s and 80s, and I'll be very happy doing that. So I don't know if you knew that.
I would love that. I don't think you should wait that long. You should come by immediately.
I understand, but
he could do the comedy stuff. He could do the crime, hard-boiled stuff, whatever he wants. That'd be awesome.
That's hilarious. But yeah, did Victor ever have a favorite character in the crew?
I don't know if I ever talked to him about that, but we would always talk about how the characters work and don't work, and how to use them for maximum efficiency.
Okay.
And how to play characters off of one another, or sometimes we would talk about a story and say, this was really good. Where, butting up Jughead and Veronica, if they were head to head, it was just you didn't really have to do a lot of writing. The characters did all the work. Stuff like that, like knowing who to put together, and knowing a lot of times which talent to work together was really important.
Do you
No, go.
I was gonna ask regarding Jughead in particular. I mean, again, I only have that late 60s, early 70s kind of initial perspective on Jughead. But and clearly, maybe especially post TV shows like Dobie Gillis, you had Bob Denver's first breakout character before Gilligan. You had Maynard G. Krebs, and there's a lot of Jughead in Maynard G. Krebs. And again, I almost wonder which came first, and when did Jughead become, if not a beatnik, just the zen kind of, hey man, whatever. And I mean, and again, I know that's one of the things that irritates Veronica about him, but that he really, he always really was kind of this like, yeah, whatever, man, I'm going to go with the flow, and certainly would have his moments of irritation, but it always seemed to me mostly that Jughead was just, shrugging at life and going, yeah, as long as I got a burger and hot dog, I'm okay,
Victor referred to Jughead as Jiminy Cricket for Archie. Okay. And sort of playing Archie's conscience, and I thought that was brilliant. And we would talk about like different runs on Jughead a lot, because Jughead's a hard character to get right. A lot of people struggle with him, and we obviously Sam Schwartz was like brilliant, just absolutely brilliant, perfect slapstick, perfect way to kind of build up. Like even though Jughead seemed like he was doing nothing, he simply controlled the moment, and Sam's stories did that a lot. The recent classic stuff, we would talk about Craig Boldman and Rex Lindsay a lot, that they really had a terrific sense of the character. And then when we rebooted with Chip and Erica, and then later on Ryan and Derek, and what they got right, and how it was a modern version, but still you could add in wacky and zany elements, and people really responded to it. And Jughead could do that easier than other characters, which was always, I guess, kind of his secret superpower.
That's cool. And I always love that, Reggie, would normally be the antagonist, but every now and then Reggie would get real, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, Reggie's a good guy. We like Reggie. He's cool. He should stay,
Oh, yeah, I mean, everybody loves Reggie, and they love to either hate him or they love for him to, like, turn it around and be a good guy all the time. He's one of those really cool characters. He's the perfect... I always thought Archie would made a good Ferris Bueller, talking about characters that I felt. I look at so many teen properties, Nickelodeon, Disney, 80s movies. I always look for sort of the Archie connection, because I feel a lot of them have it. So much of that, the stereotype of a teenager story, I think, really came out of Archie. And, Reggie always struck me as the anti-Ferris Bueller, the evil Ferris Bueller. He could get you tickets to any show in town, but he was going to extract a price, and that kind of made him a neat character.
And did Victor, I know, again, Michael had the wonderful solution regarding Archie and the married life of, well, he doesn't have to choose. So there's two versions. There's Archie's life with Veronica, Archie's life with Betty. Did Victor ever voice any sort of preference of, when they get old? Like, did he ever talk about them getting older prior to Michael's, story?
He did, but it's the amazing strength of those characters that even if you have a favorite, you're still always rooting for the other one to sort of win Archie's heart. And and then the other side of the argument was you'd always wish Archie would smarten up and finally choose the right girl, and then you'd argue who you thought the right girl was. So there was if you were taking it from the point of view of the girls or the point of view of Archie, you always kind of would be still stuck in the middle, which was neat.
That's hilarious. Jeff Loeb, I know, had a favorite Archie story that he told me about one time where Veronica to prove Archie's devotion to her. And forgive me, listeners, I'm sure that in today's much more correct world that this is going to seem very old-fashioned and you might roll your eyes. But she basically, I think, dropped her purse or something, and she's like, oh, Archiekins. And he, like a bolt, ran to grab the purse before it hit the ground. And it's ran as fast as Barry Allen. And again, it was great. It was Bigfoot comedy and stuff. It was classic comic book cartoon 60s comedy. And and again, a lot of it sold through the art. And I don't know if it was Stan that drew it or DiCarlo or one of the others from the 60s that might have done it. But it was great. It was excellent. And my favorite story always was where Betty decides not to have the ponytail and just have her hair down, and she goes to the beach, and all the guys are on Betty and are just like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And finally Archie is like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, I thought you liked me. What are you doing? And it was great. It was like Betty won that day. And, it's like, that's a fun story. I mean, those are the kind of silly little things that, again, would satisfy us over 8 or 11 pages, and it'd be like, oh, that was cute. That was fun.
And you have a guy like Jeff Loeb, who, as brilliant a writer as he is, still remembers a moment from an Archie comic that I'm sure he looked at when he was 10 years old, and that's in his head forever.
I'll tell you, the one that haunts me, and I know I've talked about it with Alex Segura before, and I think it was even in conjunction with the great Halloween collection, was that cursed teddy bear when they go to the abandoned mansion.
Yes.
And yes. Man, I'm telling people listening, if you don't know that story, find it. It's incredible. I don't mean to, I've seen it online, described in a blog before and stuff. And I mean, God, I don't know the last time you guys reprinted it, but it's so great. And it really is like a tale of demonic possession. I don't know what decade, if it was from the 70s or earlier, I'm not sure, but it worked. And it is a great kind of chilling ending as well. You know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I do. I think that was a Stan G drawn story, and maybe George drew it.
Wow.
I mean, George wrote it, George and Stan. I think that's another thing, too. In my head, I was always reclassifying the Archie artists, who I liked the most. And they were, it's still kind of jumbled around. And I would go in and, to me, the best physical comedy guys where the characters always were acting were Harry Lucy, Montana, and Schwartz.
Sure.
Like, whatever they did, the characters were funny, even if you couldn't read, you didn't know what was happening. They just acted and danced a certain way where you just couldn't stop laughing. And I would go in and sometimes I'd find the same gag done in two different ways and show it to Victor to be like, what do you think of this? Which one do you think is better? And we would sit there and especially with an old Montana newspaper strip, we'd go over, the whole grid and explain how he's really break down. Oh, look at this. He didn't have to do this here. There's one where, this is outdated, but Archie and Veronica are in Mr. Lodge's hunting den, in the house in the mansion.
Sure.
And there's, there's a stuffed, lion on the wall. There's a giant drum. They're sitting in front of the fireplace laying on a giant bearskin rug. And Archie's bouncing marshmallows off the drum into his mouth. And it has nothing to do with anything other than it makes a noise to bring Mr. Lodge in. But it's so funny. If it ended there, you'd be completely satisfied with it. But then they wind up cooking the marshmallows in the fire, lighting the bear rug on fire. Archie and Mr. Lodge have to throw the flaming bear rug out of the mansion. And right as this safari hunter's there to meet Mr. Lodge to take him on safari. And the guy is this nerves of steel. Nothing's ever scared him. He can't wait to go on the safari. They throw the flaming bear rug at him. The guy shoots up in a tree, and they never see him again. And it was so ridiculous. You couldn't stop laughing. And they used the same gag, whereas except it was Archie and Jughead, and they took a stuffed alligator from the same room and decided to bring it to show and tell at school. And they couldn't carry it, so they put the stuffed alligator on a leash and put roller skates on it. And, of course, lose it and then scare Mr. Weatherby, and he shoots up a tree and you never see him again. And it was the same gag done, 5 years apart in the newspaper, and they're hysterical and they're brilliant. Victor and I could sit there and break down that whole story on how it worked and how it was completely different, even though it was the same sort of payoff to the gag. And I don't, they're going to miss that. That was really, one of a kind sort of conversations you got to have.
The one thing that I think Archie always had an advantage of over the other comic book companies was the distribution through the supermarkets. And every now and then, because especially in the early 2000s, when, after the bust of the 90s, when comic sales were starting to kind of tick up again, never to the level that they were obviously in the 70s and 80s, but, or early 90s, of course. But, everyone's like, oh, wow, Avengers Civil War cracked 100,000 or whatever.
And every now, like, I don't know who broke the story, but every now and then you'd hear, yeah, guess what? Archie sells like over $250,000 every month through its distribution. And no, they're not. They may not be in the stores, so they may not be in the comic shops, but they're in the supermarkets. And guess who else is in the supermarkets? Moms with kids. And these kids are getting. I mean, so it was like, yeah, man. It's like, hey, don't diss Archie. Archie's doing doing all right, and reaching an audience and creating new comic book readers.
I mean, it's almost like required reading to elevate to the next level of comic book readership. You had to pay your dues in the Archie lane, learn how to read a comic book, and then you'd be allowed to read some other stuff too. But you had to keep Archie in your even as you got older, you'd always pick up an Archie, even though as a young man, I was matured and read superheroes, but I'd still pick up the funny Archie books, and I always liked stuff with humor. It always fit, and you look at what Archie's done with distribution over the last 10 years. Newsstand is still sort of the backbone of it, but we didn't really have a huge graphic novel program before. Now we've not just mined all the old stuff, but put together collections of the new stuff, put together collections highlighting different stories, different characters, and that's become enormous business, having a real vibrant comic book publishing that does hit the direct market, but also hits the book market audience well. We were like first with day and date on digital, like all these different things that I don't think would have happened under a different administration at Archie. And having John there, and then having guys like Victor where you can lean and go, if we do this, it's new and radical. Will we break anything? Like, is there anything we're not thinking of?
Sure.
And, hearing you can hit the gas knowing you'll be safe with whatever crazy new initiative you're trying at Archie was always really a great relief.
Do you have any memories of anything interesting happening when Roberto Aguirre-Scarza, who of course is the backbone of Riverdale, but also was doing great comic work as well? Any Victor Roberto stories as far as them like getting together, and any thoughts that maybe cross between them?
Well, there's a bunch of stuff. I remember John explaining, because he had the conversation with Roberto on what he wanted to do with Afterlife, and John explaining it to us at one of the exec meetings. And I remember, do you mean like Mad Monster Party, or is this like an EC comic? Like, how do you, what is this? And it's like, no, it's full-blown horror. We're going to do it. I was like, well, okay, I'm getting it. And Victor loved that kind of stuff. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, immediately you would think the old-school guy would be like, I don't think we should do this. And I know we had a lot of conversations about keeping the characters true to who they were. And that was really important. And that, I don't think ever really was a concern, but just the fact that he would stress it made it front and center in everybody's mind. And Roberto really picked a perfect way to he started with Archie Glee crossover, moved over to Afterlife. And then one of the times he was in New York, we had really Archie's first creative summit. And we went out to this local place we would hang around at. And from that meeting, just everybody talking. And I don't remember each person's contribution, but having 5-10 people in a room kicking around ideas and riffing on each other was terrific, because we came up with a lot of things that you saw in publication within the next year or two, and the fruit of what Archie eventually became in publishing. And you would get the reboot and different horror books and different ways to look at the Archie characters. A lot of other characters introduced that we kind of let go dormant. Things like Katy Keane were discussed way back then. So it was really neat. And I don't think you get that without having a good meeting and having different people with different perspectives, again, come together and kick around ideas.
You mentioned Katy Keane, and I am curious, especially with the premiere of her show coming very shortly on the CW. Didn't it appear also in Tower Comics? Didn't Katy Keane, or was she always Archie?
Katy Keane was always Archie.
Okay. Maybe I'm thinking of Tippy Teen or something like that. Maybe I'm, and obviously, because I have a friend that, ironically, as opposed to reading Betty and Veronica, she read, and again, I guess it was Tippy Teen in Tower Comics, which is, it's so funny. There's the Archie group, and yet, Marvel, and people may not remember, but Hellcat before she was Hellcat, Patsy Walker was the female Archie at Timely Comics and at Atlas Comics.
Yeah. And she was, I think, was she a model too? Was it the same kind of setup?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not. I don't know that. I don't know. But then I was going to say another version, and I just spoke to Barbara Freelander. You were at Terrificon. I don't know if you ever had the chance to talk to her, but
no, I know the name though.
Barbara was, in charge of DC's romance comics, but also had come from a teen journalist background in terms of covering rock groups in the '60s, and she was like one of the instrumental people behind Swing with Scooter, which was like, DC's kind of Archie knockoff and everything. Yeah. So I found that kind of interesting. And again, and this again shows you the strength of Archie that, even back in the Montana and Harry Luce, right? Or what was Harry's last name?
Lucy. It
was Harry Lucy, excuse me. I'm thinking of Luce, the news publisher as well. But anyway, that Archie has always been imitated because of its success. And isn't it interesting, at the same time of the Golden Age of Heroes, that's when Archie debuted, like 1940 or whatever, or 41. Was it 40 or 41?
It was December 41.
There you go.
Because at that point, Archie was MLJ Comics.
Yep.
And they were putting out a ton of superheroes. And then Archie showed up on Pep 22. He didn't even have the cover. Nothing. He was just a
The Shield, right? Wasn't the Shield the big Pep star?
The Shield was the big thing. That was like the Star-Spangled Superhero, even before Captain America. And there was a lot of really cool superhero properties, and we've been kind of digging through those again. But, I mean, in the back of the book was an Archie story. And all of a sudden, 1942, the first full Archie comic comes out. 46, the radio show happens.
Insane.
And then there was the newspaper show. I mean, you look at how quickly that character exploded at a time before social media, this is just really word of mouth.
Yes.
And then you talked about all the ripped off or inspired versions of Archie. Dobie Gillis, never mind all the TV shows, but all the comic books, TV shows. I mean, everything was pulling pieces from Archie to do an Archie-esque type property. And you think with that amount of competition, there would have been something to take hold. And you look at all the superheroes that took hold. And Superman popped up, all of a sudden you have a bunch of other superheroes. Archie pops up, you had a bunch of other sort of Archie-esque properties, and really they all disappeared.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then Archie keeps chugging along.
Totally, man. No, and I think another one was either Blinky or Binky at DC was another, and more contemporary with those early days of Archie. Well, again, like I said, when I was 4, Everything's Archie, the cartoon comes out, but also, more importantly, Sugar Sugar, which becomes a national sensation. And I'm going to let you tell the story. I almost started there. I tipped it a little bit. But yeah, and also any observations, because I did ask Victor about the success of Sugar Sugar. But yeah, like, fill in the stories. Take us to the beginning of how Sugar Sugar came in the hands of Archie.
Well, that was all through... I don't know the whole story. You probably might even know better because Victor would have told you. But that all came through Don Kushner and Ron Dante on singing.
Yep.
But the one thing that always blew me away about Sugar Sugar was that was the number one song of 1969. That if you think about the year of music in 1969, Woodstock, I mean, you would not think Archie would have a top 10. Never mind. Oh, number one. You forget it. I mean, you name every great rock and roll band ever. And they were all competing for number one in 1969. And there's Sugar Sugar. And to this day, the damn song comes on, and everybody still goes, I love that song. All the songs that get played out a million times that you can't listen to again, and this Sugar Sugar comes on, you go, yeah, that's a cool song. It's magic.
Within the last 20 years, there was some teen movie that played Sugar Sugar as part of the film, and it was in the trailer and stuff. And you saw these, and they were modern kids, and you saw these 13-year-old girls dancing around to Sugar Sugar, which I love. Well, I was going to say, and I don't know if you know this or not, but as you say, it was Don Kirshner was the music mogul producer. He was behind the creation of the Monkees, and initially Sugar Sugar was offered to the Monkees. And Mike Nesmith kind of speaking for the band, and at that point, the Monkees were very frustrated because beyond singing, they weren't even allowed to play on their records. And in some cases, I mean, God, Mike Nesmith was an incredible songwriter and proved it with the Monkees, but also Linda Ronstadt with Different Drum and, the Stone Ponies, and was just this, incredible songwriter. And they were all very talented. But Mike being the best songwriter, I think, of the four, is like, hey, man, shove your Sugar Sugar. And I'm paraphrasing, we want to do our own music. No thanks. But Don knew there was a hit there. So he assembles these studio musicians, and as you say, Ron Dante, who was not only the voice of Archie in the Archies, but really, playing every part of the singing, of the male parts of the singing and stuff. Yeah. And it's this like perfect, it was bubblegum music, but it's the quintessential bubblegum song in the best way.
I used to think of all the things that had to go right for that moment to happen. Because I forget what year the original Archies appeared, but it was well before '69, and it was Archie, Jughead, Reggie, and I think it was not like the typical rock and roll trio. I think someone had like a clarinet, like it was a bunch of instruments that you don't immediately think of when you think of the Archies.
Oh, that's crazy! I didn't know that. Go on. Yeah.
Then it morphed, and then you had the girls involved, and then it became a little more rock and roll, and then all of a sudden the song shows up, and the band is ready made for you in a comic book. It's amazing. Just all of the things that had to go right, and they did.
And Archie. And also, I maybe my memory is wrong, and I don't know, but I seem to remember Ed Sullivan in the same way that he introduced the Beatles, introduces the Archies and Sugar Sugar, and they play the cartoon of them performing this song. And it's just like, oh my God, look at this. This is amazing. Or, it's so funny. A couple of years ago, there was a big controversy because Marvel did covers that there were hip-hop tributes to. And someone had the gall to say, hey, that was my idea. Marvel stole it. And I found an Archie cover that parodied the Abbey Road cover. And it's the Archies crossing the street. It's like, you didn't create anything. Sit down. And it's like, and again, because the Archies did it first, and it was just like, that's great. And by the way, I love the fact, and I did talk to Alex recently about like the Archies being with the B-52s. That's outstanding. And all the music tributes that have followed since and stuff have just been great.
Well, the B-52s is coming out in a little bit. And I love it. And we've done so many cool ones. But my favorite was when we had the Monkees show up.
There you go.
And that was recent. Alex wrote it, and I was just like, oh man, this is super cool. and I was like, I listened to the music. I used to watch the shows like crazy. This one's got to be good, okay? And I'm just so happy, like to you have that opportunity with Archie where everybody knows it, Absolutely. There's even a story where Goldwater was in, I think, L.A. somewhere, and met Paul McCartney, and said, I'm going to take the opportunity. And told him, he goes, I'm CEO of Archie, co-CEO of Archie, and yada yada. The guy goes, Archie, I know Archie, I love you. And you're like, holy crap, Paul McCartney. Like, do you get any bigger in rock royalty right now than Paul McCartney? He's screaming, Archie, Archie, Archie.
That's outstanding, Jesus. Have you ever met Ron Dante?
I did. He's a sweetheart. He years and years ago, maybe the first New York Comic Con, I forget how it happened. I'm still probably low on the totem pole, but he hung out at the booth and he brought his guitar, and one of the guys who was a backup singer hung out and they started singing at the booth. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty surreal. That's kind of cool.
That's outstanding. No, I'm a big Ron Dante fan, and in fact, if people want to hear another like kind of sister to the Archie song, Ron Dante did a thing called Tracy, and again under an assumed band name, the Cufflinks. But it really is just Ron harmonizing with himself with A-Track and everything and doing different parts. And it totally could have been an Archie song as well. I'm shame on me, I'm not even mentioning the follow-up to Sugar Sugar, Jingle Jangle, of course. Great song.
Well, yes, which is now the drug hitting the streets of Riverdale.
That's right. Yeah, and also Josie's getting her own show now, which is great. The Pussycats are getting their show.
She's on Katy Keane, and the first episode aired. The first episode was last Thursday. This Thursday is the second one. I will tell you, I like Riverdale a lot. I like Sabrina a lot. I love Katy Keane. I love the energy. It's a lot of music. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of, fantasy about living in New York, a little bit of the New York struggle. The characters are nice. Everybody's likable. It's just really, a really well done show. Like, do you remember Fame at all?
Oh, sure. The movie or the TV show or both?
I remember the TV show as a kid, and it's got that kind of energy where they broke out into song, and Glee had that kind of fun energy, and the characters are just so likable. And Josie, I met the actress who plays her at San Diego the year before Riverdale broke out, and she's like, their whole cast is really cool, but she's awesome. Like she wore the pussycat ears, like she was all in from day one, and she really gets a lot of spotlight here, which is great. And Lucy Hale playing Katy Keane is perfect, and it's a really good cast. I'm really liking it. The stories are fun. The music is great. It's just I really dig that. And worked on Katy. I remember rebooting Katy Keane, 10 years ago with Andrew Peepway, and I know that character has got all the potential in the world.
That's excellent, man. No, I'm psyched. It's funny. I remember a few years ago when John took over and was talking about, hey, not just comics, the Archies can really be a force in, current pop music as well, just like it was back in '69. And I'm like, oh, please don't, like that Devo 2.0, that kind of have those sanitized versions of the Devo songs and stuff. And it's like, I don't know if that's going to fly, man. I hope, good luck. But again, like you said, no, what we've seen on Riverdale has been great as far as the music, and I have no doubt that as it continues on Katy Keane, it will continue. So I had no idea that it debuted Thursday. I've got to, half the time I'm watching my DVR to catch up on stuff, so I'm going to have to do that.
I know. It's really cool. The amount of, in the last 10 years, it's been so much at the company that's growing and trying to rebuild and find new directions, and it's just been this whole sort of company overhaul. And we've had so many pitches on the properties over the years, and John really spent the time to make sure everything has been right. I mean, we had so many different opportunities over the years, and he said, nope, this one's not it. This one's not it. And knowing you really can't have a failure out of the gate. Like, every little step you make has to be the right step. And having that kind of attitude, knowing that we have to make a move, but knowing we have to wait to make the right move, has been why Archie's had so much success in the last 10 years. It's not just take what's thrown at you. It's really thoughtfully create a whole new way for the world to think about Archie.
Well, that's great, man. And again, I'm sure Victor was excited and anticipating the premiere. Well, and I don't know because I know he passed away this weekend and everything. So I don't know if did he see it before it aired? I would imagine you guys probably had some sort of preview of it before it aired.
He did see it before it aired. He gave it the thumbs up. It was, he's been in the hospital for about, since early December, in and out.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask. I didn't know. Yeah, I wasn't sure, Mike, how sick he was or if it was, all of a sudden. So go on.
Well, he's just just amazingly stubborn, iron-willed individual. So I always kind of thought he would live forever just out of sheer will. But the last month or two, he's been in and out of the hospital, and I'd go and see him like every other day and talk about, he wanted to know what's going on at the company, what's happening. I was like, oh, did you get to see Katy? You're in the hospital. And he's like, oh, yeah, I did. And so it's just like, even till the very end, everything that was going on, he wanted to know about it. He wanted to be a part of it. Make sure this credit's correct. Make sure this thing's correct. Could you handle that cover for me? Like, he's forwarding me emails and stuff while he's trying to get himself healthy. And it's just like, just stubborn, iron-willed, loves it. I mean, 60 years at one company, and he loved to go to work. I mean, that's amazing. That's passion.
Well, I can appreciate that. I saw an example of that, Iron Will, at that first New York Comic-Con convention that Reed put on back in 2006, and it was, it was a really small, especially given how the entire convention center is taken over by New York Comic-Con these days. But it was only in like a portion of the Javits Center, and there were too many people. And so the fire marshal had to shut down the room, and basically, literally, if 10 people left, then they would let 10 people in. And there was this insane line, as I know you remember, trying to get in and everything. And I remember being in line a few behind Victor, and him trying to talk to the fire marshal. He's like, "Look, I'm the president of Archie Comics. I demand to be let in that building in that room right now." And in typical New York fashion, the fire marshal's like, "I don't care who the hell you are. You're not getting in until 10 more people leave, pal. That's it." And it was great.
Yeah, he would tell you. Remember, he would tell you stuff direct. And it was never really sugar-coated. If you liked something, you liked it. If you didn't like it, you didn't like it. I remember I got this script from someone, and they were working in the office, and it was really not a good script. They no longer work there, so I'm not really telling anyone. I was like, "Hey, Victor, I don't know how to fix this. They want to write, and their heart's set on it, and I'm kind of struggling what to tell them." So I said, "Would you do me a favor? Would you look at it tonight? Give me a couple of notes. Let me go over it with you. I want to try and see if there's a way to fix it." He goes, "Oh, okay, no problem. I'll help you, kid." So he comes back in. He hands me the script. It's got one note on it on a Post-it. Red ink. It says, "It sucks." I was like, "What am I supposed to do with it?" He goes, "Tell him the script sucks." I was like, "I can't do that, Victor." And he goes, "It's really bad." But and I remember working with the writer to try and fix it. And they were getting a little annoyed with me. I was like, you can always work with Victor if you'd like. And they're like, no, I'd rather deal with you. I was like, okay, no problem.
Outstanding, man. Well, we lost a giant this weekend, man, and I'm sorry to see him go. I know that his place in comic books is set. Oh, didn't even talk to you about the Comics Code. I was about to give you the wrap up, and suddenly I realized, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't speak to him more about the Comics Code, because I know he was a member of it.
He was a member, but when he was working at Archie, one of his jobs was physically bringing the art boards over to get them approved by the Comics Code when they would stamp them right on the back. And I forget who it was. It might have been Bill Vigoda. He drew some crazy stuff on the back of the artwork, nothing that was going to see print. And I guess he was I guess he wanted to be more of a fine artist or modern artist. And whatever it was horrible. And the woman who worked at the place was horrified and called Victor down. He had to erase what was on the back of the board because she wouldn't approve what was on the front, which was fine. And that thing was on the back.
Hilarious. Oh, my God.
And he was like, he's like, what am I supposed to do? So he took paint and he painted over the ink lines on the back, and he kept arguing no, this is not what we're going to print. But yeah, he had all these really, just about everybody and everything. He knew, he worked with Wally Wood. He, knew Stan Lee. If there's a name of art and writing or anything in comic books, he usually had a story about him. And again, he didn't quite go back to the Golden Age, but he knew all those Golden Age guys. He knew Jerry Siegel, by the way.
Wow. Well, that's right, because didn't Siegel write for Archie for a little while, or no?
He was writing the Crusaders Super Team, not Super Team, Crusaders, Mighty Crusaders, under Jerry S, because Stan Lee worked, so it was Jerry ESS.
Oh, wow.
And Victor was credited as Victor, Torr. Just the silly stuff they would do. And, how do you you don't. There's no way to replace someone who knows and seen that much history and dealt with, every major name at one time or another, at least shook hands with them. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, again, like you said, he came out in the late 50s, and
a lot of those Golden Age guys were, hell, they worked into the 60s and even early 70s and stuff. And that's, I've always appreciated my conversations with Paul Levitz because, and of course the late great Len Wein and Marv Wolfman, because, they knew a lot of these old timers as well. But you're right. Hell, even Victor had a good, 10 or 15 years on those guys in terms of the people that he got to meet and when he got to know them and everything. No, pretty amazing. Really. Jeez.
It really is. Great Victor story. A couple of years ago, they were doing a Mad Magazine retrospective at the Society of Illustrators.
Sure.
And Victor was a huge Mad Magazine fan. And Scott Dunbier just did that Mad Magazine artist edition for, beautiful oversized artwork. I don't know if people know it.
Yeah.
And collected in a book. So brilliant stuff. So I picked up the Mad one. I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I love the artist. Like, that was a whole thing. And Victor hadn't seen one. I was like, all right, dude, before we go down there, I'm going to bring in this book. I know you're going to love it. And we'll talk about Mad before we go down to the exhibit. He opens up the book. Oh, this thing is gorgeous. I can't believe the printing. Oh, my goodness. Going over the whole thing. And every single story, he knew where he was when he read it. Victor knew the ending to every story before we got there.
Oh, my God.
And so, right? And he remembered the year his mom threw his comics out, his Mad magazines out, the whole thing. And I was like, wow, have you read this stuff in a while? Did you get like the archives collections from DC or what's the story? He goes, no, I read them when they came out when I was a kid. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. And he goes, this guy pulls out his hair and digs out of the tunnel with it. And we turn the page. And he goes, yeah, see, that's the story. And I'm like, what? And he like that encyclopedic Archie memory went on everything he enjoyed. It was perfect. And then we went to the Society of Illustrators and looked at all the original artwork and saw all the stuff. And that's one of my absolute favorite nights was just him and I hanging out in the city looking at artwork that wasn't even Archie related. It was just stuff we both enjoyed. And now that book is like my absolute favorite book because in my head I go through him telling me every single thing in his life and on the page with perfect memory.
That's outstanding. Were there original Mad creators at the event? I met Al Jaffe at the Society of Illustrators when Blake Bell was there, and I think it was something for Timely's pulp books, the prose pulp books that came out at the same time as Timely Comics were in the 40s. And Al was a guy that was working for both and everything, and had great stories, and one of the surviving artists that could really talk about that period of Timely and everything.
Oh yeah.
So were they there?
Well, I don't remember if Jaffe was there. I know I met him at something else, and we just kind of dopey and stared at him, And but I remember like Nick Meglin and more of the guys who were currently on it and had that huge sort of like Victor, where they were there for decades and
sure.
had this big. Sort of knowledge of the characters and stories and different things were there. And, they had a lot of early comic code. I didn't realize the symbol was different going back to the comic code. There was a star, and I never saw that before.
I never saw that either. I just remember the postage stamp. Yeah.
I took some pictures. I'll send them to you. It was really neat.
Oh, I'd be interested to see them, yeah.
It looked like a sheriff's star, and I remember saying to Victor, like, oh, I don't remember this. He was like, oh, yeah, they used it from whatever year to whatever year. And I'm like, well, why do you know all this stuff? It was just amazing.
I keep meaning to purchase a Comics Code Authority T-shirt with the logo on it and stuff. And especially as we get further and further away from it, that it is this, like, antique idea and stuff that I'm sure a modern comic book reader would have no idea what it meant. But I just do. As much of a barrier as it was to great things happening in comics and stuff, it was there. So it's, I can't help it. It was part of my childhood. It was staring me in the face for a good 20 plus years. So, even longer than that.
but it's an amazing time in history. We're talking about a second ago about Elvis and rock and roll and burning records and what was going on and how comics were getting just hammered. And, what happens if the code doesn't exist? Like, what would it be? I mean, everyone, puts a lot of negativity on the code, and I get that to a degree, but also, in a way, it prevented comics from just completely disappearing.
Sure.
And at that time, you talk to the people who were around then, that seemed like it could happen. And today it seems alien, but it was really an intense period of history.
100%, man. No, you're right about that. And also, and it's funny because it reminds me, and it's certainly Star Trek has been on my mind lately with Picard being back on, but I know reading Mark Altman's book, The 50-Year Mission, which was a great oral history of the entire run of Star Trek from the beginning on. And they were talking to the Next Generation writers, and how Gene really was like, hey, you can't have conflict among the humans because we're past all that. And it forced the writers to come up with more creative sci-fi ideas where it wasn't just two crew members at each other's throats or whatever, and it wasn't these human conflicts. It was, of course, the human versus alien conflict, and you could project human things in there. But just that he said it just really forced us to, think more creatively. And I think the same thing with the Comics Code. A lot of times it is when you have handcuffs on you, you think of creative ways of getting out of them or getting around them. And I think that happened a lot in the Comics Code, and maybe would have been responsible for some of the more fantastic ideas that came out that didn't, cross whatever the code didn't want them to do.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that because, like we were saying, Archie came out in the 40s and exploded. And some of the stuff you look at is a little risque, but I really think that post-Comics Code, that early code 50s, 60s stuff, is absolutely brilliant. And, and the gags, and again, those artists and writers, I can't imagine people producing more pages. I know people always go to Kirby and Lee on Fantastic Four and these amazing runs, but I can't. You probably look at what DeCarlo did and Glatter did, and the amount of pages they turned out. Harry Doyle,
Harry Lucy.
What's it? No, not Harry Lucy.
Oh, sorry.
Frank Doyle.
Oh, Frank Doyle. Yes, indeed. Yes.
He's probably written more stories than just about anybody in comic books. Victor has to have edited more stories than just about anybody in comic books. I can't imagine anyone coming close. And for that level of creativity to go on for that many decades from so many different people, while all these other comic book ideas and companies were coming to be and going out of business and, coming again for the first time with, a 90s group and Image and all the different expansions and contractions of comics, there was Archie and Victor and all these guys kind of coming up with crazy ways to tell the same gag with about 5 teenagers, It's amazing.
All right, I thought of something I did want to ask you, Mike, because, and I'm truly, I want, if Victor ever spoke of it as well, but one of the more infamous 90s comics was it 90s? Yes, I believe so, Archie versus the Punisher. Now, a lot of people laugh at that, and they don't laugh at it kindly. And they think, oh, God, what were they thinking? Maybe I'm in the minority. I think it was one of the funniest books and greatest ideas because you had Frank Castle at his most badasses literally in the face of in my view, a Bog Montana almost style of Archie. And it was so great. Really, it was like Roger Rabbit when, Bugs and Mickey are together for 5 seconds. And you're just like, this shouldn't be happening, but it is, and it's great. So Archie, did Victor have any thoughts on, for better or for worse? Go ahead.
Archie's made a lot of money on, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that over the years. And that was one of the first big ones. And that started at San Diego. It was before my time, obviously, but as a joke, Tom DeFalco, who was then the editor-in-chief of Marvel,
right,
started in comics working for Victor. And that's part how. Yeah, no. So it was Tom and Victor were good friends, and Tom helped Victor sort of create the digests, how to put them together, and figure out how to get them to the printer and produce a system. Yeah, Tom was really major in a lot of that. He did a lot of Archie writing, comedy stuff before we brought him back years later, recently to do stuff.
And he's done great, by the way. Great. He's done great writing for Archie. So, yeah, absolutely. But go on with your story, yes.
He's one of those writers that even the worst thing he's ever written is always really good. He's just so good.
Yeah.
Victor and him obviously go back decades. And Victor was there with Bat and Lash, who came as a writer.
Lash. Sure.
And they were, and just passed away. And
yeah.
could you have a more wonderful, sweet, funny. Just a perfect. Another guy like Victor, where there is no one like him in the planet. It's just another genius. And they were, my understanding, they're goofing around and joking. And I don't know who said it, but any one of those three could have said something that funny. We should have this crossover, Archie meets the Punisher. And everybody laughs. And I think Victor was the one who kind of went, no, we really should do this. And it was kind of one of those write a contract on the back of a cocktail napkin kind of night. And they figured out how to do it. And Batten wrote the whole thing, and it was absolutely brilliant. Only someone with that kind of mind can do it. Victor made sure that the right Archie artist was on it. But then I think someone threw the Punisher stuff. Buscema?
I'm going to look it up while we're talking. I'm not sure. I don't.
Yeah.
Because it was.
So, like, you had this.
Yeah, go
right?
on. Go on, because.
So you have perfect Archie being drawn, and the Punisher is chasing this guy who was some sort of criminal that looked like a evil version of Archie, and he has to go to Riverdale to hunt him down. And you have what never should have worked be brilliant. And I think Victor's favorite joke was it was the only Punisher book where he never killed anybody the entire issue.
It was John Buscema. Tom Palmer, of course, inking him. But yeah, and then like you said, it was Batten and Stan Goldberg doing the classic retro Archie look at everything, because it was even a little more retro than a modern Archie of the moment and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just remember, of course, Frank has to be at the prom because he's taking out the guy, and Archie's at the prom. I think it was a prom. Oh God, so great.
And Stan G got his start at Marvel.
Yes, indeed. Go on and tell the story. Absolutely.
I mean, that we used to do a really nice Archie holiday party, and for years it was like there was such a unique atmosphere to it because we hit so many generations of Archie artists. So we had the guys who broke in the 80s, the 90s, like every decade kind of had some representation that was working at Archie. And every year at the holiday party, two guys that passed away, Stan G and John D'Agostino, John Dag,
sure,
would get together. And John Dag hired Stan to be a colorist. I think he was running the art department, hired Stan to be a colorist at then Timely Comics.
Yep.
And the two of them would just sit and talk. And I don't know what year it was, but I finally realized just shut up and sit at every table you could possibly sit at. And I would sit and listen to everybody and all the different generations they would come from of comic book history, and just listen to whatever stories they would talk about. And those two, like you talk about, like just a unique experience to sit and hear what they had to say, the back and forth, the rapport. I mean, they'd known each other for so long. Johnny, I think it was under Johnny D. As a letterer, he lettered Amazing Fantasy, first appearance of Spider-Man, Amazing 15. And I'm sitting there getting ink pages from John D'Agostino. And I'm like, hey, John, this is you. And different things in his history. He's like, oh, yeah. Like, it was nothing. And I'm like, this is kind of a really amazing career you had. And, oh, yeah, it's work. It's cool.
Yes.
And all those old-timers had just like that attitude. Victor had that, too. Like, if someone would be like, oh, my God, you're Archie, he'd kind of like, yeah, yeah, that's fun. And people were like, I've been reading your name my entire life. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I didn't know. That's neat. Like, and it was just this cool, it was just a job, and they loved it and all, but they were sort of modest about it. And it's just a great, I don't know, just they don't make guys like that. And even of the guys they don't make like that, the handful of them just stand out as unique, even in that crowd.
I completely agree, and it's something I like to point out all the time because I won't name podcast names, but some of them, and I've made Howard Chaykin laugh making this observation, some of them treat the old-timers like they were the Keebler elves in the tree making magic cookies. And it's like, no, man, these were deadline guys grinding it out, and not with any indifference, but it was a deadline job. And yet, despite those deadline jobs, they made such amazing things. But it's not like, this wasn't Leonardo studying the blank canvas and having time to really ponder what he was going to put on it. It's like, no, I got to get this done by Friday or I don't get paid. and I need to get paid.
Yeah.
So that's the brilliance, I think, of a lot of those creators before, they finally heard from us that how great they were. I remember hearing Jim Aparo at his first San Diego in the 90s and stuff was so touched and had no idea how beloved he was. And that he, it was like, oh, really? Okay. It's just like, that's great.
Yeah.
So, but again, like you said, there's the other guys that's just like, yeah, whatever. That's what I did to, earn my money so I can go out to eat that week,
We had a woman just come to the office that was an Archie fan, and she was covering, I think it was Riverdale for something, and I forget what she was. Major magazines and major TV outlets, and she came to the office to do like a little promo feature on Archie. It was really cool, and she was so wonderful. And she pulled out a fan letter she sent to Victor when she was a kid, and then pulled out the letter that Victor sent back to her, thanking her for her letter.
See?
And like she's like, and Victor was like, "Oh wow, thank you. Why would you keep that?" Like it was so like nothing to him. Like and so all the time people, and you'd get, now Victor's 60 years, so you'd get families, generations, like parents, kids, and like a new baby, like, oh, we're all like Archie readers because of you, Victor. And it's just like, and he'd be like, oh, okay, like it's just alien to him. He didn't get it. It was.
That's great, man. Well, the response that the woman got back from Victor and everything, maybe it was a certificate along with the membership card for the Archie fan club, but I remember some sort of stationery that had a border of like Archie emblems, in a circle or whatever, just like an Archie like profile shot or whatever,
Yeah.
Kills me.
And he was a good artist too, because a lot of those different things he did the artwork for. I mean, he did a ton of lettering at Archie, but every once in a while you'd find stuff that he drew, and he was a really good artist. I have an Archie drawing he did for me in my house hanging up.
Oh, that's cool.
Really good artist.
Wow, that's amazing. Jesus. Very, very cool. All right, I'm going to leave it right there. That was good. I see now. This happened to me and Franco the other night. Well, dude, I want you to come back because I mean, you've got a great career and also a great. I want to hear your stories of your days at the Kubert School and what you did in terms of. We've talked a little bit at various meals about some of your old teachers, and some of them are great names from the Silver and Bronze Age of comics as well. So, yeah, man. And again, I'm glad you came on. I'm sorry it was under, tough circumstances with losing Victor. But yeah, no, I mean, again, every time I see him, like, well, you got to come on and do the show. So now you've done it once, so you got to come back.
I appreciate it. And you know what? I absolutely love Victor. Working with him for 20 years was a gift. And not being able to say hello to him every day is going to really, really kill me. I miss him a lot, and to get to talk about him and Archie really put me in a much better mood about everything. So thanks for that, and you know where to find me anytime you want me. I'd love to.
There you go, Mike Pellerito and the late Victor Gorelick. I'm sorry that Victor has passed, and as I say, I regret that I didn't have another opportunity to pry more stories out of Victor about his time at Archie and his view on the comics world. We honor Victor, and we thank him for his contributions. And he won't get forgotten. Thanks a lot for listening to Word Balloon today. It was all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, greatly for your support via Patreon. If you would like to join the League and like what I do here at Word Balloon, is it worth $1 a month to you? Is it worth the price of a comic book a month to you? If you think so and you want to help contribute, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the Patreon ad at wordballoon.com, and that will take you to my Patreon page. Thank you very much for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. This episode was also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. They're having a big month this year. Great books are debuting. John Layman's The Man Who Effed Up Time. We're talking to John about it and other projects that he's got on the way on another episode that's dropping today on Word Balloon. There's also Zach Thompson's Undone by Blood and God Killers from Mark Zabel coming up. And they'll be sharing Aftershock shelf space with other books like Animosity from Marguerite Bennett and Raphael de la Tour, and A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Gordon Suzuka, Dark Arc from Cullen Bunn and Juan Doe, Dark Red from Tim Seeley, Baby Teeth with Donny Cates and Gary Brown, so many other great books as well with the Aftershock logo are waiting for you. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions for preview pages and the diamond codes on how to get these books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks a lot for listening to Word Balloon. Another great Word Balloon episode is coming your way. A great conversation with John Layman, the man behind Chew, and so many other wonderful series. And John has got an Aftershock book that debuts this week, The Man Who Effed Up Time, as I said. So we talked to him about that and a lot more. A long time coming getting John Layman on Word Balloon, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Coming out later today. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions. Copyright 2020.